Hey everyone, we're live here. To anyone expecting Brandon, I apologize. I'm hashtag not Brandon. I'm Zack stepping in for Brandon at the last minute. I'm here with Jack, who is part of the NX core team and does a lot of stuff with React in NX. And yeah, Jack, do you wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. I mean, I've been on the stream a couple of times, but for those who are not familiar, I was kind of in the beginning of when we started doing React support for NX. I was the one that did a lot of the work with the help of Jason and other folks, obviously. So recently, we've been doing a lot of different things in the React ecosystem. So we can talk about that a little bit. Maybe some of the plans for some of the newer plugins, like what we're doing with that. Victor just published an NX12 plan. So if people haven't seen that yet, it's on GitHub as an issue. I think it's pinned at the top. So if there's anything you really care about that's not there, you can let us know, and then we'll see what we can do.
Very cool. So I'm bringing in Brandon's notes here. Jack, did you have any demos for today to do React Native or?
I don't prepare anything. I don't want to, because React Native is notoriously slow. Not that the framework and whatever is bad. It's just there's a lot of stuff that happens. So I don't think I have anything demoable. But I think we do have a lot of topics that we can go through, so it should be okay. Yeah, I don't want to make a demo that looks really bad.
That's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about it. But yeah, in terms of those topics, was there anything in particular you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I think one we can just address very quickly. So we have a React Native plugin as well as a Gatsby plugin that we kind of officially announced in December. The plan was always to bring those back into the monorepo, the main monorepo for NX. The reason why we created a separate one is so it's quicker to, I guess, iterate on the code, and without affecting the rest of the monorepo. But this month and probably next month, we will be doing a little bit more of the migration work. And part of it is blocked by the fact that we don't have official E2E support for React Native. That's in the backlog. So once we have that, then we're more comfortable about bringing that into the main monorepo and having CI set up to run everything. So watch out for that, because I think some people have been asking for the framework itself called Detox, which is the E2E runner. So if you're using Cypress and other things, it's similar.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. So is that just running a local emulator for like a Android or iOS phone?
And then yeah, so you can do it several different ways. Like for iOS, I don't have an iPhone, so I would just use an emulator or a simulator. And then for Android, you can use an Android emulator, or I have my phone set up here that's hooked up.
So cool. So you can choose either way.
Exactly.
That's neat.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Let's see. I think there's another question here about the code migration. So the question was, NX migrates or updates our Angular code for us. So do we plan to do something similar with React code? And I think it's like with NX, we try to do things safely. And I think code migration is one of those like things could potentially go wrong unless it's like a very, very simple one-to-one migration. And a simple migration, something like for NX11, we did upgrade of Emotion, which is one of the styling solutions for React. And that one, all we needed to do was do like some searcher in place with packages. It used to be like Emotion something, now scoped as like Emotion / React, I think, instead of core. So that's like a really simple migration, and we did that for users. But everything else, I think we had to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And most React code, I feel, don't really lend itself super well to code migration, because like Angular, there's more things you can analyze. You can look at the modules, you can do things, and where things live and stuff are more standardized. Whereas React, I think there's more potential that we can screw something up, and we never want to be in a place where someone does a easy migration and then things are not working. And
that's not easy. That is the opposite of easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But cool. If people do have specific things they want help with, we can look at those on a case-by-case basis.
Very cool. And what's the best way to submit one of those? Would that be via an issue to our GitHub?
Yeah, you can submit issue, and maybe it can even be a question, right? So we do have questions in there as well. You can go to the community Slack channel, ask over there. You can DM NX DevTools on Twitter. We have someone who monitors that account, so anyone who has a question there, they'll reach all of us, and then someone will address it.
Cool. Let me throw up the links here to some of those other resources like the Twitter, and we've got some questions here as we're coming in. So this was actually one of the things we had in our document, one of the ones we wanted to get to. Official support for Remix Run. Any thoughts there, Jack?
Yeah, I think this has been asked by several people. I want to differentiate, like, we try not to integrate too tightly with any framework or tool chain, because we're basically just a way to execute code, right? With Remix, and personally, I haven't really, besides watching the introduction video and reading some of the marketing pages, I haven't really played around with it myself. But from my understanding, it's kind of like Next.js, Gatsby, where it's a file-based routing system. And the support that we can provide should be very minimum, I think, because it really just relies on certain file structure for the routing. And I would guess that you can easily support it or support Remix with just the Narwhal workspace run commands builder, but not guaranteed because I haven't tried it myself. If someone is using Remix and want some help, maybe let us know and let me know. We can maybe walk through and see what's going on there. But my guess is you can already do it with run commands. And for people who don't know what run commands are, it's basically a way to execute arbitrary shell script within NX. So like say you have a bash script or no script, right? And it does something like it prints hello world. You can use run commands to run that command from NX, and you benefit from all the caching, all the depth graph stuff, like all the normal features you get from NX, but you don't actually need an official NX or community plugin to do what you want. So I would check that out first, and if you need help, let us know. We don't have any official plans to support Remix. We just have a lot of things on our plate.
Yeah, we've got a finite number of resources, so we're trying to target that as best we can. But yeah, the community plugins are also always a great solution if someone wants to take on some of that work themselves. I threw up the link to the run commands Jack was mentioning there. I use run commands all the time in my stuff, Jack. I used to like try to write my custom builders. I was like, why am I doing this? let's just write a JavaScript thing and just like run node inside of run commands. So
yeah, and to add on top of the run commands, there's actually a generator we have. So you can do like NXG Narwhal run commands. So like Narwhal workspace run commands, and you can generate. So you don't have to actually open up your workspace JSON file. You can just do one command, and they'll add it to your workspace. Yeah,
that's actually is what I linked in there. So yeah, so that's
okay. Awesome, cool.
Yeah, that's perfect. So yeah, there's for run commands, there's like two things you can do, like Jack was talking about. You can go into your workspace .json or your Angular JSON directly and go add that as a builder, something to run, or as an executor rather. But this the run commands schematic here linked is going to you can use the NX console this way and just kind of have that really nice form field where you know exactly what the options are, and it'll run things with a dry run for you by default, so you can kind of see, okay, what's it actually going to do before you actually hit run to make it happen. So it's a nice way to just get them all in there. Yeah. I love the NX console just for discoverability, actually, because like there's so much stuff in there, and it's kind of hard to document sometimes. I'm on the docs team, so we've been looking into better ways of doing that in the future. But like the NX console is, I think, actually a really, really good tool for discoverability if anyone wants to just check those things out and see all the different builders or generators that we have available. So yeah, very cool.
By the way, you said builders.
I know. I'm still.
so maybe for people who aren't familiar with what's going on, we're trying to change the terminology. So like what we used to call schematics, we're now calling them generators, and builders, we're calling them executors, just because. Like builders, I feel like maybe add some confusion because you're not necessarily building something. You're like executing something. Like there's some computation going on. So we're trying to rename them. Jason and Victor are working on a lot of cool stuff on the core side. So NX11 changed some of the terminology, although we still support the old one, obviously. And then with NX12, we're gonna push a little bit harder on like just making sure people understand what's going on.
Yeah. So for people from the React world too, since we're very focused on React, this terminology, schematics, and builders came directly from Angular as well. So a lot of NX is built on top of some of the tools for Angular, but trying to make it more available to the larger JavaScript world, so to Node, to React people. And so especially when you did have that context, I feel like we wanted to update it so it was more intuitive what these things are doing. So there was a change that came in with 11. So you may have seen that come through. And I'm still living in the old world. So if I say schematic or builder, please forgive me and know I meant generator and or executor.
Yeah, I do it all the time too, especially when you talk to Angular developers. When you say like generators, they don't know what you're talking about. So kind of like switching back and forth.
Well, I think too, just generator and executor are objectively better terms for these things. Naming is hard for sure, but you say a schematic, and unless you're familiar with the Angular community, I don't think most people would know what that means. But and similar for builders, like you said, it's most of the time we're not really building. it's something else. But yeah, anyways, let's jump into the next question. Benjamin David said, I used NX for the first time last week, React.js and Node. I couldn't find any documentation on deploying. Will that be cleared on the README package.json being shared? So yeah,
that's a good question. I think usually we shy away from deployment support, meaning like we don't want to write executors that are tied specific to like Netlify, Heroku, whatever, because the way people deploy their apps are just very different depending on what project you're on, which company you're in. That being said, I think it is something we should provide at least some hint on as to how you can do it. I have a blog post for Next.js, but like the same principles can be applied. So this is talking about like just a plain React Node app. So not Next.js, not Gatsby. There's a way you can do it. The main hint is use run commands, like we talked about earlier today. That's probably the way to go. If you have shell scripts or node scripts, you can use them per app and have them deployed through like some kind of workspace specific script that you write and maintain. If you are using other things like Next.js and you want to use a Vercel platform, that's a whole other beast. We can get into it or maybe save it for a future topic, but James Henry, who actually is a former Nawalian, he's been working with some of the folks at Vercel pretty tightly. So that story is improving a lot every single day. Docs are coming if you are a Next.js user. this should be a very, very, very simple way for you to start an NX project to deploy on Vercel. So watch out for that. The PR for that's already merged, so I guess the next version will be published as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Looking at our comments, B-Man says hi. Hey, B-Man. So B-Man, we had a question here from B-Man that Jack, you actually answered earlier, I believe. This was asked by Bram earlier. I love the React Native plugin. Thanks for this, Jay. Good job, Jack. will this repo eventually become part of the NX repo or stay standalone? So you had mentioned, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, we are working on a plan to move it in. The main concern we have now is there's a higher level of quality standard for the main repo. So we're looking to get the detox E2E stuff all working before we say we're comfortable with this being in the mono repo. So that should be this month, or maybe early in Feb, depending on how fast we can get things done.
Yeah, very cool. Going into our pre-asked questions, I think you may have touched on this a little bit, Jack. It's coming in 2 parts, but React 17 lets you write JSX without reporting React. Next.js had been supporting this for quite some time, yet ESLint complains. Can you update the default ESLint config for NX and React projects to turn that rule off?
Yep, nice and easy. Yes, we will look at turning that off. The main thing is the Next.js generated code is sharing the same ESLint config as React, but we just need to override those settings for the Next.js app. And I think moving forward, we might even look at turning it off just in general, because React 17, if you use the right Webpack setup, you can actually just avoid it altogether, not just with Next.js. So, yep, we will turn it off.
Good deal. And just to reiterate, I think I linked back there the issues. With stuff like this, it's also, I think, helpful for us to have that issue as a ticket to handle it. So it's another great place. Thanks for bringing it to our attention here, but always nice to have an issue for that as well. So I'll jump into our next question here. This was a longer question. I tried to edit down that we got beforehand. It's still coming in 2 parts, but I'll just go through it real quick. Can you look into official support for Prisma? A community plugin exists, but it's unmaintained, and it's difficult to work with Prisma via run commands, as the CLI requires interactivity. And there's also the complication that multiple instances of Prisma in an NX workspace will overwrite each other because they're all writing to the node modules. So I'm not super familiar with Prisma. Jack, are you?
Me either. I don't really know.
Okay.
So I guess that kind of answers it. We're not planning to have any official support, and I wouldn't hold my breath on it. If we have unlimited time and resource, we probably will support a bunch of things. It's just we have to be very, very careful about what we support. Just the more we bring under the NX official monorepo, the more time each of our developer have to spend not just fixing bugs, but just general maintenance. If things change, you have to go and update stuff. So I don't know who maintains the community plugin, but maybe something can be worked out. Maybe someone can take it over, or maybe that person is still open to maintaining it. I don't know.
I don't know who's maintaining the current one, but I do know, B-Man, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sign you up for work, but I know B-Man has done a lot of content on Prisma in the past. So if you want to check out his Twitter here, I think there's links to his YouTube channel and to some of his other content. I think that he's got some stuff on, setting up Prisma, and some of that may be helpful for some of the work you're trying to do to get it in there. And B-Man has also helped some other people in the past get their own community plugins. He's got some of his own as well too. So if someone's looking to maintain, he's a really good contact to reach out to about that.
I guess alternatively, instead of a plugin, I wonder what support is needed, either within how we set up our executors and run commands to work. Maybe there's something that's not. Oh, sorry. But maybe there's something that's not Prisma specific, but maybe there's a more general feature that's missing to make it not super friendly towards Prisma. So that's something we can definitely fix, right?
Yeah. Well, I've had breaking this problem down to one of its parts. It seems like one of the parts is when you encounter a CLI that requires that interactivity, where you're like have to type back and forth with the console to actually do stuff. And most of the times these CLI tools will have some nice options to be able to skip the interactivity, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes that's hard to do. So if I don't know, it would be cool if we could have something where like we built in some way of doing that interactivity, automating that interactivity as well. So that may be too hard of a problem, but
if you're on like Mac or Linux, I guess you can pipe yes into, or I don't know what exactly needs to be automated. Is it just like yes no, or
yeah. Well, so I've had it in the past where I was trying to set up like setting up like the Firebase emulators, the local Firebase emulators for like running a Firebase instance on your own computer. I was trying to do like something to demonstrate, this is how you could do some stuff with Firebase, and it was very hard to do that because it requires some interactivity, like which thing. It was like a radio button. Which things do you want to install? And I was like, well, I just don't know. I'll just just put some notes in the documentation. You got to do this step first. Sorry, there's no builder. But or just execute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. I guess with the run commands executor, like if there are ways we can improve it somehow, especially with I/O, we can look into it. It's just not going to be specific to what Prisma needs.
Right. Exactly. So, cool. In terms of questions, let me see if there's been any new questions here on the sheets. And if not, maybe we could talk more about Remix, because I'm interested in that, Jack, but I'm not super familiar. It's a premium thing, right? Like you need to pay for a license. How does that work?
I think it's like so I don't know too much about it, so I might say the wrong things, but it seems pretty simple. Like you pay for a license, and I think it's like $250 if you're just an individual developer working on like whatever you're working on. And then the team license, I think it's like $1,000 or something. So it's actually not super expensive, like especially if you're at a company. Like $250 per year is nothing for a company. Like they have interesting ideas. I think the one thing about the React ecosystem is, I think for a while things have been kind of slow, like in terms of there hasn't been a lot of new libraries or patterns that emerged. Like I remember in the beginning when, I don't know if you remember the Zack, but like when Flux came out and the Flux store was first announced in like 2013 or 2014, I forget. There were like just millions of Flux packages every single day, like new ones. One of the ones that came out of that was Redux. And now that's still around. There were a bunch of other things that were developed over the years. Hooks was another big thing. Recently there hasn't been a lot of like, sorry, go on.
Well, for reference, Jack, my first job in the industry was in 2015, so I wasn't around for that, but I've heard of it. Like I've done some of my research on that. So and you know I love NGRX, so I'm familiar with Redux kind of patterns. But the Flux stuff, just it definitely seems to me like, especially getting started back in 2015, there was a lot more kind of libraries out there for React than for Angular, right? So it felt like React was specifically like meant to be very plug-onable, or to make libraries for it in a way that Angular maybe wasn't. So
and I think the point I'm making is basically like, I think for a number of years it hasn't been, besides hooks maybe, I didn't feel like there was a lot of new things that people needed to learn for React. But with the advent of like Next.js, Gatsby, and now Remix, there seems to be like new things now that are coming in, and they have to deal with like React by itself is a very simple library, but the way that you go from like, hey, I have an idea for an app to like now it's actually deployed, it's actually very, very complicated. Because like, yes, you want to use React, but like, what do you actually do? Do you use create React app? You can use NX to generate your workspace, but you want to get that into production. There's a lot of steps needed to get that to work. Something like Next.js, and why I love Next.js is it's very simple, and they design it to be very simple. You don't have, you write code basically. You don't have to maintain the tooling so much. And I think Remix is kind of taking that similar idea of like, I just have an idea for an app, and I know like I have these routes, I have these components. This is how I want to fetch my data. So I don't want to do all the other ceremony about like configuring stuff, understanding Webpack. Like I don't want to know Webpack. I don't want to know anything, right? And you probably shouldn't want to know Webpack. Like anyone who says they want to know Webpack is probably
a liar.
They don't know what they're in for.
Yeah.
And we love Webpack, obviously. We use them as well, but it is very complicated.
Yeah, we love Webpack because we don't have to worry about Webpack, right? So,
right. And I think now with a lot of people doing server-side rendering, it gets even more complicated, right? Because it's one thing to set up a single-page app in React. That's like fairly easy. Like anyone can do it pretty much. But if you want server-side rendering, then something like Next.js is probably the only thing you can do. Maybe Gatsby, and now maybe Remix, where you can go from nothing to something deployed in like 5 minutes. So I mean, the idea itself is pretty powerful. And from what I can see, they borrow a lot from like the Next.js kind of ecosystem where your routes are directly tied into your file structure. So you put in like you create a routes folder, and anything in there is a route. And you can nest them, do whatever, have like dynamic segments. So I think it's pretty cool when they integrate, because of the two people who are working on Remix are the React Router folks. So they integrate very tightly into React Router, and they fix a lot of issues that I even had in the past, like remembering scroll position, and not just for the main document, for like smaller scrollable elements inside the page. Like that's actually a very, very hard issue to solve for some reason. It's always like one of those things where like I don't want to solve it, just whatever. So now they claim to have solved that using just one line of code, like a hook that they provide.
Oh, cool.
I think conceptually I'm pretty excited about it, but for now I'm still sticking with Next.js. I just feel like
it's the horse you know how to ride. Yeah.
Exactly. It's already in production. Lots of people use it. Vercel as a platform has been getting better and better, and we're obviously working with them. So maybe we're a little bit biased towards Next.js, but it just feels like if I were to start a React project now, I would probably do Next.js.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember when getting started too. It doesn't seem as much of a problem now, but it definitely felt like there was a lot of hype-driven development going on, where some new tool would come out and you'd see people just jump to it because it's the new thing. So it's cool to hear you talk about that. And I think a lot of us have more moved this way too. Let's stick with the thing that works rather than the new hotness immediately. Just before let's have this thing prove itself before we all jump on board with it. So
yeah, but that being said, the two guys involved in that project, obviously they have been in the React community for a long time. So I don't think it's one of those like, oh, they're gonna be gone in like a year.
Yeah,
I think they're gonna be around for a while. So my hesitation is more about like this being only a little bit of time passed since they announced it. They even said like don't use it in production yet. Because there might still be some things being worked out.
Yeah, makes sense. So they need some time to be battle tested first.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very cool to see because at its core it seems like React in a way Angular isn't. It's a DOM manipulation library kind of, right? And a lot of the stuff that Angular comes with, like being more prescriptive, but also just having like a router built in is like the backbone of the framework. It sounds like that's probably what Remix is, given like that the people who are making it, the guys that did the React router.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's still in the spirit of React, I feel. Like they really care about routing and accessibility. So one of the arguments I made is like, a lot of apps these days don't have proper accessibility. And that even goes to scroll position, like I mentioned before. Like if you were on a list page for products, for example, right? You have a store. You click on one of the products, go to the products page, you click back button, and now all of a sudden, like where you were is gone. And I get annoyed by that. But as a developer, I don't want to solve that problem because
Right.
like sometimes it's not that easy to solve it, right? Like Angular has I forget the setting, something about scroll positions. So there is a way you can get around it, but if you were to implement and maintain it yourself, it's not like a really trivial thing to do, I feel.
Yeah.
So Remix, I guess, comes in and tries to solve that. But in the spirit of React, everything else, they leave it up to you. So
Okay.
There's not a lot of like, you have to do it this way because this is the way that we do it in Remix. They just really they care about the data loading portion and SEO and accessibility.
Okay, gotcha. So it's maybe not like a Angular type framework on top of React. It's more of a sticking with React and providing some helpful stuff as a framework on top of that.
I think it's solving what's always been the thorn on the side of many React developer, which is like server-side rendering is not straightforward how you want to do it, like it is in Angular. Like in Angular, there's only really one way you can do it. In React, there's many different ways. So I think it solves that pretty well. So that's exciting.
Cool. Gives you a definitive answer on that. That's cool.
Exactly.
Cool.
Actually watch your stream with Caitlin that you linked.
Oh yeah, I was totally. I forgot the name of Remix in that one. I felt so bad because I didn't even know what to Google. Like I was looking for React framework, I couldn't find it. But yeah, it definitely it's weird. So being mainly in the Angular world, I catch a lot of stuff going on with React without fully understanding everything. So like Suspense was another one I think we talked about with Caitlin. Yep. So is that maybe since we got some time here, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Is that an API that's out now in 17?
Yeah, it's been there since 16, I believe.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but sometime in 16.
Yeah.
I don't
but
remember
this won't be like the bomb that Hooks was, right? Like it's not going to change the way people do React, is it? Or will it?
It will, in the sense that like Suspense basically lets you have the ability to like stop the rendering, like suspend the rendering of because right now, like basically once you get to the render function for React, you have to keep going. You can't like render partially and then stop. So Suspense allows you to do it in a way where you can wait for the data to be ready before you continue, and then
so that could help a lot with like the async kind of operations. Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Okay.
So like I guess a typical use case is like you're data fetching, and while you're waiting for data to come back, you may want to show like a loading animation, and then once the data is ready, then you show the UI. So that's supposed to help with that. So it's you can use it now. I can't remember what the latest official thing is. I think it's stable, but someone can correct me on that because there are other things in React 16 that you can start using, but they may get changed in the future.
Gotcha. Cool. So now is it that it's easier? Is it that it's more performant to do those kinds of things that normally you'd have a problem with? Like I'm in no way like fluent in React, but I've messed around with it enough that I can see like anytime I started getting into async stuff, it was like this doesn't play so well, you know. So
I think coming up with like official patterns for things is important, and that's something I think is not just React specific. Like when you do have certain conventions that the community all buy into, it just makes the I guess lowers the barrier of entry to any project. Like if everyone's using Suspense for the async operations, and we jump from project to project, you're not surprised. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this guy is doing it some other way.
Things look familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe prior to Suspense, people obviously had to deal with these things, but the solution to them wasn't as standardized. And now with an official API around this stuff, it may be a little bit easier to create a solution, or to be familiar, have some familiarity with the solution, because it's like a standard solution. Is that a fair rephrasing?
Yeah,
okay.
Basically, and there are some performance considerations too, and I'm not going to speak to that too much because I'm actually not super familiar with what some of the performance characteristics are when you mix it like Suspense and stuff. But Dan's original talk, they talk about like them being able to use this feature and maybe optimize the way that React updates and renders your components. So watch his talk and maybe read up on other things. Like I'm not the best person to talk to about these features.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'll have to jump into that. That's very cool. Are there any other updates recently in the React ecosystem?
I think right now there are a few small things. Like I said, we announced a React Native plugin and a Gatsby plugin. So with those things, there are definitely things we can improve on. Like I think some things that the community, like those two communities have adopted, we should probably look at like, okay, what are some of the things that we should be supporting? And one obvious one is someone opened an issue about Gatsby themes, and I think we don't really support it super well because they want to create themes as like workspace libraries, but because Gatsby doesn't understand how to
when you say a Gatsby theme, what is a Gatsby theme?
So I'm not a Gatsby user.
Okay.
Per se, so I don't actually. I need to do more research, but basically, I think there's a way they can like install themes to use within Gatsby. And someone on the stream, if you use Gatsby, you can let me know and school me on this. But as far as I'm concerned, as an NX maintainer, I think there's a way that Gatsby needs to map the packages. Like imagine you install like an npm package, then you can use that theme right away within your app. But because you're creating like an NX workspace library, it's not actually inside your node modules or anything. So Gatsby doesn't know how to pick it up. So those kind of things that I think might actually block people from adopting it, adopting NX. I mean, so we want to make sure those are addressed. So there's a lot of small things like that I think we're going to be working on.
Very cool. We got a comment here. React Query is the best tool in React world.
That's cool. I agree. Mostly, I think for anyone who does data fetching, React Query is the go-to. That being said, so Mark Erickson, who maintains Redux, he has something in the incubator. So I'll just plug that now. So there's a Redux toolkit query, which is basically React Query, except it's backed by Redux. So all your stuff is going to be dispatched as actions. You can see them. You can trace them. You can see them inside your state.
Redux Dev Tools. Nice.
Toolkit. Sorry. Did I say Dev Tools? Yeah. Redux Toolkit is where this incubator project is.
Okay.
But But if you're not using Redux, I would just use React Query. I think it's simpler.
Cool. And yeah, let's see. There
are other things I can ask you to.
Yeah, let's do it. we've got time.
I think on last week's episode of your show, you two were talking about React and like your experiences as Angular developers in the React world.
Yeah,
and I just found it very interesting because I guess I don't run into those same issues just because I've been in both roles for quite a while.
Yeah.
So it's always refreshing to see like how someone who's not familiar with React, how they approach React. Because there's also one thing that we try to help with NX is like having those common conventions and patterns so people can be more productive when they work on their apps. So I don't know if there's anything you want to discuss on the topic, anything you're confused about, whatever.
Sure. Well, in the plus category, the way I started getting into React when I decided, okay, I want to learn this a little bit better, I installed the Narwhal React like plugin for React, and I just like used the NX console and like started seeing, okay, what's the different generators I've got here? How can I set this thing up? And I like the positive of that is I felt like I could get into it immediately. I could kind of like use the tooling to like lean on it to help me learn and understand things going on in React. I worry that in the negative column, maybe I worry that I'm trying to remake Angular in React sometimes because of that. Like I'd be very interested in your perspective, for example, as someone who's like come up and seen both, from the beginning. That would be a very interesting perspective, I think, for me to understand, because I worry about that because I'm not sure. Like, is this how React developers actually structure their apps? Is there a standard for how they structure their apps, or am I just trying to recreate React in Angular's image? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, I get it. So I think the discussion here is like, instead of looking at, so say you have an Angular app already built, instead of like saying, looking at that code and try to do a translation to React world, it's maybe more about understanding how things work in React and how to do it from the ground up, from scratch, rather than porting stuff over, right? So I think on that end, and at least we try to be helpful, like with our generators and stuff. So when we generate code, we install certain things like testing library, which maybe not everyone uses, but in our opinion, and a lot of people have this opinion in the community too, like that is the best testing tool that you can use when you do use React. Even things like Redux, we are trying to be a little bit opinionated when it comes to Redux. So if you do use Redux, we don't want you to use plain Redux. We want you to use a toolkit, because for 99% of the use cases, it's actually the superior choice. So I think from someone who's getting started on their app, we try to provide all those generated code. So you can look at examples of how to write tests, how to structure your components and stuff. But beyond that, we're a little bit hesitant to be too opinionated, just because a lot of people use React differently. They have different libraries and stuff. And we don't want to get to a place where we're just supporting every single decision you can make out there. So it's like, okay, you don't like React testing tools, so you can use Enzyme for this project, and you don't like Jest, so you can use Karma. Like, we don't want to get into that. We try to maintain like a consistent set of tools so people can get started very quickly, try to learn things, and
without being overly prescriptive about it.
Exactly. And I think one thing that you can take away from the Angular world is how to structure your files, which is not the most interesting topic, I think. But in React, there are so many different ways people do it. Like some projects that I've been on, when you open up your editor, you search for index.ts, it'll be like 10,000 index.ts. And it's not very useful, because like I'm looking for a specific component. The reason why index.ts are used everywhere is because they will create a component that's a header. So they will create a folder called header, and then inside there will be index.ts. And then any styling or any supporting files for that component will also be in that folder. Whereas from the Angular world, you would have like a header directory probably, and like a header.component.ts, header. Component.css, header. Maybe, I don't know, service.ts if there's a supporting service for it. And I like that pattern. I think a lot of people in React are starting to warm up to that pattern, where your file name should be just whatever, should give a hint as to what you're opening or what you're editing, rather than having like these generic TS files everywhere. We didn't go as far as putting component in the file name. Like, it's still header.tsx if you use NX. We don't do like header.component.tsx, but we have debated about doing that. We just decided against it because we thought maybe the React community will not like us and then ignore us.
Yeah. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
But they say the same thing. Yeah, you meant to say use the same naming convention here. So yeah, I think that's what our generators are set up to do too, right? Like
So we
we
didn't go with the component in the file name. Just we felt like it would turn too many React developers off initially.
Yeah.
Although we have since heard a lot of feedback about like, hey, they actually want this. And I think they're mostly coming from Angular developers. So I don't know if we should listen to them or not.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? Because we want to be more than that. So yeah, just trying to, for me, it's trying to understand that world too, and make sure I understand it.
And something like when I was jumping between different projects recently, I actually found it like super liberating to be constrained to certain patterns. It's because when you're in a new project or a project you haven't opened in like months, just being familiar with how things are set up was like a huge win for me, at least. Like having the proper conventions in place and you're not surprised by where things are, how things work.
Yeah,
that was like a very, very beneficial thing.
Yes. It's sometimes getting into code bases where you can see like, okay, they started with JavaScript and then at some point they decide to move to TypeScript, but there's like some things are still there. And just it's hard to figure out what's going on sometimes in some of the projects you just get dropped in. But the cool part about Angular apps has always been, okay, you kind of have an idea of where to look for most of these things. Do you feel like that exists in React too, or is that something maybe NX could maybe help with, or is that?
So I'm gonna plug Next.js again, I guess.
Yeah.
I think if I were looking at Next.js app, I know where things are because like there are specific ways you set up your pages and your API endpoints. So I know right away where things are. Now, there are other customizations people can put on top, or maybe I have to relearn a few things or learn new things. But for the most part, I'm not surprised when I go into Next.js app. With a plain React app, I think there are a lot of things that you probably open up the project and you're like, whoa, I expect this to be used this way. At least with NX, I think we try to help somewhat. But people can just ignore whatever we generate.
Well, and that's on purpose, right? So.
Oh yeah.
So cool. Yeah. Andrew Lucas says Angular conventions scale well for React projects. Yeah. I feel like that's true. Again, I don't want to speak for React developers, but.
Yeah. I think it's true for the most part.
Yeah. Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jack. You go.
I was just saying, like, I agree, especially for file naming conventions, structuring folders. There are other things that you just can't port easily, like there's no dependency injection, for example. So those ideas you can't port easily. You can't kind of map it to like context and using hooks for that, but it's not like a clean one-to-one translation.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I think this came up with my conversation with Caitlin was just like there's having a nice intended solution for some things, like maybe a route guard might be a good example of this, where in Angular, you use if you don't want someone to go to a component, you use a route guard, right? Instead of doing something like this, and what that gives you is kind of like it maybe goes a little to what Victor was talking about with his Angular is like an onion article, where you have by doing this and introducing guards, you kind of have, okay, well, I'm going to have a guard system on top of my application, and so all my guard information is over here, and so that way you can know, okay, well, if I ever want to prevent users from doing X or from going to X route, you could find all that logic here as configuration, essentially. With other stuff, I mean, if there's with no official routers, it becomes very hard to do that, first of all, but it also, I think, lends itself to different custom implementations for similar stuff a lot. You see where I'm going with that?
I think I understand. So like, if you were in 10 different projects and they all use different routing solutions, then the way that you go about preventing a navigation is going to be different.
Yeah,
So
it has to be different if you're
it
using
has
different
to
routes, right?
be, but at the same time, so we officially support React Router because
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily the best one, although if you're not sure, it is the best one to choose, I think. It's used probably the most widely inside React community. And the way that they do redirects and stuff is pretty simple. You just render a component, a redirect component, and then that'll redirect you. So there are different ways you can approach that pattern. Like you can, so like say you have a component and now you want to throw like an authorization behavior on top. You can go with like the old school React way, which is create a high order component. I don't know if people like still do this anymore, but you can enhance your component by wrapping it with a higher order component function that will spit
Yeah.
out exactly the same component except with some enhanced behavior. So that's one way to do it. You can also use hooks now.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a better way to do it if your team is using hooks and bought into it fully, is to just create these authentication hooks where if you're not authenticated, for example, then they just get redirected right away instead of rendering the component. So
Yeah.
I think the specific way you go about the solution might be different, but the general pattern, I think, persists. So if you understand the pattern of like, am I using a high order component or am I using hooks, then maybe the implementation for the hook is different, but you shouldn't be surprised at how it's implemented because the pattern should be the same across projects. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes. I do think there's something about um, my initial inquiry that I want to make sure I get across, which is that like so Angular feels like there's by introducing these systems like the guard system, for example. That's just one example, but it allows you to build your app in such a way where you have like your components are like maybe one system, maybe that's the UI system, but then if you have a routing system or a state system or something like that, it feels like it just that piece of Angular just lends itself a little better to saying, okay, let's develop this thing in systems rather than here's a story, let's fill out this story and we'll completely flesh out this story, but like when we have another story that needs to do something similar, we'll have to build that again, when the next story comes.
I think what you're describing is maybe like every app has some kind of framework underlying the whole thing where someone has to maintain, whether it's like the Angular team who maintains all the official stuff, all the core stuff, or whatever for you, or that the React team who can guarantee like hooks and stuff all work. Suspense is working, for example, but they're not gonna have like specific tools for your use case. It's not gonna be like, oh, you need to guard against a route. Like we don't even provide a router. Right. So they're not gonna give you something official.
Hey, we're just doing dot manipulation here. You gotta figure that out.
Yeah, I mean they do a lot of cool stuff, but like you can find a library that can do it, or you can write your own using like hooks and stuff, right? So I think
hooks to me seem super interesting for easily composing some of this kind of stuff we're talking about. So
so I think like for the most part you can find something inside the npm ecosystem, or not ecosystem, but like the registry. You can find something that can probably do what you want. And worst case, like you just write your own, I guess. And I think
or fork someone's.
Right. I think most companies have like I don't know, platform engineers that will maintain like the core libraries that they like all the other teams, like the feature teams use. So I think we went on a tangent. Sorry, I forget what the original point was.
No, it's just comparing the differences between React and Angular, and how my point I was trying to make was Angular lets you program in terms of systems, in terms of like I don't
Right.
know if that
So
makes
it's
sense.
like the framework
Yeah.
is in
I,
place, but it's pluggable, so you can
Yeah,
switch out
yeah.
different
I
parts.
feel like
Yeah.
if I'm relating it to like building a rocket ship, I feel like with Angular I build like the rocket, and then I build the boosters, and then I build
Mhm.
the I don't know what else does it have, like a landing mechanism. Like those are all different things. And it feels like at least from my experience so far with React, it's very much, oh well, you have a rocket component, and in that rocket
Mhm.
component is just a rocket. It's not a a landing system. It's a landing component. It's not
Yeah.
a booster system. It's a booster component.
Yeah. I
And
guess
so yeah,
in that analogy, I guess for React, it's like you're given the tools, whatever tools are needed to build
yeah,
that rocket, but there's no like blueprint for you to be like, okay, here's how you start, here's where you can switch to different parts. Um, but then maybe you pivot and you're not even building a rocket, right? So you're
yeah,
like now building a car or whatever it is. So
or
it's
a
more flexible
native
that
app.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a lot more flexible, but then it does transfer that burden of like, how do you set up the infrastructure or the architecture of your app, right? That transfers to the end user of
yeah,
React. Uh,
and that can be a very costly thing to transfer to, right?
yeah, but on the
So
flip side, it can also be costly to figure out how to do the thing you know you want to do, but within
that's a
the
good point.
confines of what the framework allows,
Someone
right?
else's framework. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's why, like, I know people probably hate this phrase, but like, it depends, right? Like, which one's better? It depends,
yeah. No,
but it is
that's
actually
actually
true.
true. Yeah, no, I
Uh,
agree.
but like, I'm gonna use Next.js again, but like within
Uh-huh.
Next.js, there are certain things that you're constrained to, right? Like, if I need to add a plugin to, I don't know, use Tailwind, for example, I'm not going to go through and figure out like, how do I plug this in? Do I need to edit this component? Do I need to edit the Webpack config? I'm just going to go search for a plugin on the Next.js repository and be like, okay, there's probably already a Tailwind plugin that I can use. I just install it, put it into my config, and done. If there isn't a plugin, then the configuration is structured such that you know exactly how you want to plug it in. Right?
Yeah,
So I think there are some things that um, there are some patterns and stuff to follow depending on which meta framework you're using.
yeah.
We're like 2 minutes out of time, before time ends, but there is a question I see here.
You want to grab this one real quick? Yeah.
Yeah. So why in React? Why in React are not popular decorators?
So to give some flavor to this, maybe I don't like decorators because I feel like they're a lie. They're just like they're functions. They should just be functions in almost every case, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
And
But
I think the unit of composition within React nowadays is the hooks. So decorators aren't actually useful anymore, really. And they were like, there is a connect decorator, for example, for Redux, and you can use it still. And so I think how you want to compose stuff is hooks, and B, decorators as is still a proposal. I think people forget that it's not officially supported by JavaScript. TypeScript supports it, but JavaScript by itself is still a proposal. And someone just mentioned here too, the same person, I think, like everything's a function. So that's another thing. Like you can use decorators with functions, but there's just so many other better alternatives to decorators. I feel like decorators are this thing where you learn it once and you think it's super cool, so you use it everywhere, and then a year later you're like, oh. Crap.
Yeah.
The code is not readable.
Yeah. No, coming from JavaScript or before JavaScript, like being in Java a little bit, decorators just they mean something different to me than how they're
Yeah.
what
Well,
they
they're called
mean
annotations, right, in Java.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
But I feel like even in Angular, I wouldn't reach for decorators just because like you use a decorator, how you can use like injected services and stuff, right? You can't. It's complicated.
Yes, exactly. And seeing NGRX, for example, move away from decorators, I thought that was a great enhancement for them to go from that to just having functions instead. I feel like the cognitive load is reduced drastically too, because I don't think a lot of people know exactly how decorators work, and even I feel like I've heard Nicole's talk on them before, like, so I kind of know what they're doing, but I'd have to bring it up or like look into the docs real quick to understand anyways, because it's been forever since I've touched them. So and versus a function, I'm just like, I know it's a function, I got it, you know. Anyways, I think we're out of time here. Do you got to get going, Jack? I think I've got to get going.
Yeah, I do have, unfortunately, some other commitments. But
Cool.
if there are additional questions, just ping us on Twitter, Slack channel, open up an issue. We'll take a look.
Yeah. And thanks, everyone, for coming by. This was great. I think Brandon will be in next time. We'll do it again in about 2 weeks, and we'll get that scheduled soon. So thanks, everyone, for stopping by. See y'all next time on NX Office Hours. Woo! Bye.